Welcome to Analysis with me, John Rees. Was the Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat poisoned to death? That's the shocking question now being asked after Al Jazeera released a forensics report by Swiss scientists. They analysed Arafat's body and the samples showed that at least 18 times the normal levels of radioactive plutonium were there. The forensic experts are confident that the late Palestinian leader was poisoned and polonium must have been the cause of death. This report is just the first one being released by investigators. Besides the Swiss team, there's also a French and a Russian team working on Arafat's remains, but there's still no date set for the release of their reports. The 108-page Swiss report has confirmed what many suspected, including Arafat's wife. The late Palestinian leader was assassinated. His family are now demanding further investigations. In the studio to discuss the subject is Asa Winstanley from the Electronic Intifada website, and Zeid Al-Alul, who's president of the Palestinian Forum in Britain. On Skype, we have Dr. Ghada Kami, research fellow at the Institute of Arab and Islamic Studies, and on the phone from Palestine is Dr. Mustafa Barghouti, Secretary General of the Palestinian National Initiative. Also on the phone from Jerusalem is Paul Yuskins, a writer on the Middle East affairs. But first, let's catch up with this report.
This is Yasser Arafat landing in Amman in Jordan after suddenly having fallen ill in his Ramallah presidential compound. From Jordan, he was flown to Paris for emergency treatment, but he would not survive. On November the 11th, 2004, exactly 9 years ago, Arafat, to symbolize the fight for the Palestinian statehood, died at the age of 75. Doctors were unable to specify the cause of death, and at the time no autopsy was carried out in line with his widow's request. But in November 2012, his remains were exhumed and body samples were taken to investigate if Arafat had been poisoned. 9 years after his death, a Swiss forensics team finds evidence that the late Palestinian leader was indeed poisoned. The scientists have found at least 18 times the normal levels of radioactive polonium in his remains. Interviewed by Al Jazeera, Suha Arafat said her husband was murdered by someone physically close to him.
I was talking to David Barkley, the very important international forensic expert, and he said, yes, of course, this must have been put in his tea or in his coffee or in his water, and somebody who was near him must have given him his this. So it's so difficult to doubt, but unfortunately it's somebody of his entourage.
In Israel, many residents also believe Arafat's death was a crime.
I suppose it's possible. I mean, Israel could have killed him by just dropping a bomb on his house. And there certainly are many people who have good justification to have wanted him killed. But I think it's probably equally as possible and probably more likely that someone within the Palestinian authorities said it's time for someone to move on, and he wasn't going to move on.
In Israel, we love conspiracies, so I think it's no surprise to anyone. The question is who everybody would have had some interest to remove Arafat, so we'll have to wait and see who it was.
The head of the investigation committee, Mr. Tirawi, I'm sure is willing now to go further for investigation to know who committed this shameful crime, this assassination, political assassination of an elected leader.
Other than demanding an investigation, the family is also being forced to remember the tragic moments of Arafat's death.
I felt that I'm mourning him again. I was in a shock. I felt the anger, shock and anger and huge sadness. And I was remembering his last days at hospital, how he was trying to fight. He has fought all his battles, and how difficult it was to fight his last battle.
Despite the pain, Suha Arafat and her daughter are committed to continue the search for the truth. They believe the criminal investigation can still go side by side with the political peace process. But which can be this report's implications on the Israel-Palestine relations? Is an international inquiry demanded by the Palestinian Liberation Organization the next step? But above all, can Palestine ever achieve the statehood that Arafat fought for?
Well, I mean, this is both, I suppose, simultaneously shocking but not surprising if something can be like that. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, that's exactly how I'd put it, really. I mean, Palestinians have been saying for years that it's very likely that Yasser Arafat was assassinated, and of course the prime suspect is Israel. The only realistic suspect really is Israel. I mean, the shocking part to me was the documentary, was aspects of the documentary and how Clayton Swisher and the Al Jazeera team were treated in Ramallah by Palestinian authorities, security goons, really. It was really kind of disgraceful. But this whole, we saw a bit of it on the VT, but this whole thing about, and I saw it on BBC this past weekend as well with David Aronovich, and they were saying, oh, these Palestinians, they always have conspiracy theories. It's kind of ridiculous, because what more evidence do people need, really, than this, such hard evidence? And this whole thing about, oh, it could have been Israel, oh, it could have been a Palestinian, it could have been anyone. What argument are people who say that, what argument are they making? That Palestinian Authority has got a secret polonium generator somewhere, they can manufacture polonium. You know, Israel is known to have nuclear weapons, as a fact.
Right. What do you think about that claim in the documentary? I mean, Isa's right, isn't it? There is really only one suspect, and this may be, it's surely a theory about a conspiracy rather than a conspiracy theory.
This documentary is not surprising any Palestinian. Palestinian people, they know Israeli behind the assassination of Arafat, but this is very important gift if the Palestinian Authority using that evidence to take Israel to international court. Because when we are talking about polonium, as my colleague saying, is not something Palestinian can have or Jordanian. This weapon, the only three countries have it is Israel, Russia, and United States. Then that's the three. Then who got the interest to assassinate Arafat? Okay, but the question now, can the Palestinian Authority using this report to take Israel to international court? Did they got the encouragement to do that? That's a big question, because we know Israel behind it, but America all the time using the pressure of peace process, using the pressure of funding the Palestinian Authority before they using that weapon to stop Goldstone report, then that's the issue.
Okay, let me go to Paul, because I know that, Paul, you were in Ramallah yesterday. What's the atmosphere around these revelations?
Well, I was in Ramallah just a couple of hours ago, and I can tell you that the atmosphere in the centre of the city is one of major demonstration and protest at the loss of the great leader of the Palestinian people, with people milling around every form of transport, waving flags, shouting slogans. But let's come away from that for a minute and look at facts. And unfortunately, the facts are rather few on the ground. It's quite true that Israel had a major interest in wanting to get rid of Yasser Arafat, or to be more specific, the then Prime Minister of Israel, Ariel Sharon, was quite clear that he wanted to get rid of him. So you have to start to look at how such a thing could happen. Polonium is not only a very rare substance, it is exceptionally expensive. A microgram of polonium, and I know from my own researches from a different context, costs in advance of $500,000. You're going to have to be very careful how you use it. Then you have to ask the question, well, if the Israelis who at one stage surrounded the Muqata, President Arafat's headquarters, if they wanted to kill him, they could have done that. What you're left with is trying to identify who actually carried out this murder, who was the vehicle that did this thing. And it's something that clearly happened over a period of time. And from the sound of the documentary I heard, what you're left with is looking at and pointing a finger at somebody very close to President Arafat and finding out who would have the reason, the motive, the contact with whoever you'd like to blame for this, as actually carrying it out. And sadly, I doubt that we'll ever get to that. We'll never find out who actually carried this out. And as much as it's easy to pontificate about the Israelis having the need and the will to do it, the actual factual material, the data involved in this, is simply missing.
Okay,
Finally,
let me just bring Mustafa Barghouti in here. Mustafa, do you think that's true, that we'll never get to the root of this, or do you think that it's actually pretty obvious what the root of this is?
No, I think the picture is absolutely clear, and let me reiterate what I think. First of all, what was just found is something we've been expecting and we've talked about for years. There is no doubt in the mind of any Palestinian today, and probably many people in the world, that Israel is responsible for this act of political assassination. The question is why we are coming to this conclusion. For any crime to happen, to identify any crime, you need specific components. And I think now we have a complete picture, because first, the political motivation is there. Israel was interested in removing Arafat because they considered him an obstacle to their plans. And this was stated more than once by several Israeli leaders. The press and media is full of statements talking about removing that obstacle. Then there is the circumstantial evidence, and it is there are plenty of that, including statements recorded by the voice of Sharon himself and Mufaz, who was the head of the Israeli army at the time. So both the Prime Minister of Israel at the time and the leader of the army, as well as many others, have recorded by their voice, I mean, because accidentally some of the conversations were recorded, and this is proven, discussing how...
Well, I think we've just lost a bit of the line there. So let me go to Garda Kami. Garda, what do you think about the points that were made in the original documentary regarding the PLO's reluctance, the Palestine Authority's reluctance to pursue this case?
Well, you see, this is what's very interesting about this story, and why one understands that there's a whole story of dirty tricks here and dirty dealings. It seems to me, as Mustafa was saying and your other guests, it's very clear that Israel is the agent, was the perpetrator of this crime. There really cannot be any doubt about that. Now, in terms of, don't forget, Israel was in total control of everything that went in and went out of the Muqata'a, where President Arafat was incarcerated. So they were in total control. Now, how it was done technically is something we still don't know. And we understand that there was a great deal of intimidation of the Palestinian Authority at the time, which did not carry out a post-mortem as soon as Arafat died. But the real issue here is how can it happen that Israel, which has a track record of assassinating Palestinian leaders and would not hesitate to eliminate Arafat, when Arafat died in mysterious circumstances, the world stood by, did not demand that more should be made of it, was almost glad when Arafat was buried and everybody could forget all about him.
Okay, let me put some of those points to Ziad in the studio. I mean, what Garda Kami seems to be suggesting there is that Israel is the prime suspect, but there might well have been other people who wouldn't have been saddened, let's put it that way.
When we're talking about past experience in Israeli association to Palestinian leaders, Palestinian Israeli army or Mossad, they're using the tools of Arab or Palestinian. Then Israel cannot take that act without using someone close to Yasser Arafat or someone in his muqata or in his room or someone serving him. Then that's a big question to the Palestinian Authority. That's why no one would like to open that file, because if they open it, it might be one or two, or we don't know. And that's the issue. Yeah.
I mean that's true, isn't it? I mean, if you think of, almost by definition, a political assassination isn't done by necessarily the people who set the chain of events in motion. They're done by somebody who has to be closer to the person assassinated.
Yeah.
Would it not be better for Palestinians generally if this were laid bare now? I mean, it's out in the open. The questions are there. They have to be answered.
Yeah, I think we absolutely have to get to the final truth of this. Like, it really shouldn't be left. The truth has to come out. The final truth of who actually did it, who ultimately Israel was responsible. We do have to, as was very well said, we do have to suspect that there was a collaborator close to Arafat who actually administered the poison on the instructions of Israel. The main point is that Israel bears the ultimate responsibility of it. And so really that's the reality of the situation. And this kind of thing about, well, it could have been Israel, could have been someone else, is kind of a red herring, because even if it was someone else who physically did it, Israel is ultimately responsible, because it's, as I said, where else would they get polonium from, And the truth of it really has to come out. And I think a lot of credit goes to Clayton Swisher of Al Jazeera, and his team at Al Jazeera, who's really put a lot of effort into this, and I think he will keep going.
Garda, where do you think the best hope of this being uncovered now lies? Do you think it's with the Al Jazeera team, with who are working obviously with Arafat's widow, or with the French investigation, or with the other team, the Russian team that's working on it?
Well, first of all, we understand that the Russian team, from leaked reports, is trying to underplay the whole thing. So they might not be helpful at all in this. The French, we have yet to see what they come up with. Look, I totally agree that the question of how the poison was administered is crucially important. Suspicion has to fall on somebody close to Arafat. That's clear. And a cover-up won't work now. Our best hope is that a combination of his widow, of Clayton Swisher, whom I agree with Azar, is really excellent and an excellent investigator, himself, Al Jazeera, and popular pressure. Remember that ordinary people devoted to Arafat and his memory have not taken this easily, that their leader was just murdered without any comeback on the perpetrators. Now, I can only hope that all those together will help us to arrive at the truth. But of course, I have a very great fear that just possibly we might have the situation which has happened with the assassination of J.F. Kennedy, which is that it remains an open question. Nobody is ever found.
Okay, well, let me just put that point to Mustafa Barghouti. Mustafa, sorry we lost the line to you there. What do you think is the best hope of this being uncovered? And what do you think the general impact of this now is on Palestinian politics?
Well, okay, let me go back first to what I was trying to say. I said that there are four components, and it is very clear. The motivation is there, the circumstantial evidence is there, the medical reports are very clear about the fact that the man was killed because of poisoning and he was assassinated. What we were lacking is the instrument, and now the instrument is found, which is the polonium-210 as radioactive material. Now, the responsibility is clearly an Israeli one. I don't like this notion where some people are trying to redirect attention away from Israel to ask the question of who was that collaborator who might have collaborated to put the material in Arafat's food or whatever. That collaborator should be, of course, brought to justice. But that does not of those who committed the crime, which is the Israeli government and the Israeli army, and those who planned it, who delivered the poison, and who organized and orchestrated the whole thing, including the possibility that they had a collaborator or more. This is one issue that has to be clear. Now, in my opinion, the issue is very serious. And the only way to handle it is to go to international criminal court and to international bodies. Maybe it will be necessary to go also to the General Assembly of the United Nations. But we are talking here about an act of assassination as against an elected leader, an elected president, and a person who was granted Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, for God's sake, what else can people expect to happen before Israel is brought to justice and to accountability?
Paul, what is the reaction of the Israeli government to this? Because, as Mustafa was saying, you know, this is a very high-level political assassination, and at the very least, Israel is the prime suspect. So, what are the government saying there?
The government of Israel has denied any responsibility flatly. It's not a matter that's in public discourse. It's not a matter on radio. I haven't seen anything in the newspapers. But I would caution one thing. Everything that Mustafa and Rada Karmi has said, and everybody who has commented on the documentary and the work of Al Jazeera, is fine. But Mustafa used the phrase circumstantial evidence. You want to go to the International Criminal Court and take Israel to court. If you're going to do that, then you have to have hard evidence. Circumstantial evidence just won't cut the ice. It won't do it. You've got to have the facts.
Do you think those facts can be found? Do you think that, in other words, there's going to be a kind of hard legal case with all the links in place ever?
Yeah, I think why not? I mean, if there's the political will, as was said, if there's a political to do it, why not? Absolutely, it should come out. I think.
Yes, yeah, because he was shaking his head there. You don't think that's going to happen?
In a normal criminal case, you as a suspicion or who can accuse him that maybe hundreds, or you don't know, like a Kennedy case. But in Arafat case, we are talking about a polonium weapon, which is a three-country allocated. Then the three country is behind it. Then who got the benefit or the interest within the three? Will be the premium suspension, Israel. Then Israel, the first one to be behind. And Israel, they killed him politically before that point, when they say we don't have a partner to make peace. And after that, they siege him in his place in Muqata and Ramallah, and using every political pressure in him, isolate him from Arab world. Then all of that showing a clear evidence that's Israel behind the assassination.
God, let me just bring you in for a last word as we're running out of time. What do you think will be the impact on Palestinian politics of this?
Well, I think it's absolutely vital that Israel is taken to the International Court. That will expose the history of Israel's assassinations of Palestinian leaders and Israel's crimes. It would be an excellent idea, and the Palestinian Authority should delay not a second in doing it. The effect on Palestinian public opinion would do nothing but good, to see Israel in the dock and accountable for its actions. In fact, I would go so far as to say, if the Palestinian Authority does not do that, it could be taken as evidence of its complicity in a kind of a cover-up. It would be very serious if they failed to do that.
OK, well, thanks very much. That's about all we've got time for in the first part of the programme. No doubt we'll be revisiting the question of President Arafat's assassination as this case develops. But don't leave the programme. Do rejoin us for the second part of analysis just after the break.